SCP The Endurance is a FNAF fan game that has been in the works since 2015. The developer started this project to try and combine their two favorite games, SCP and Five Nights at Freddy's, and used this project to learn more about game development. In 2018, the game was actually revived after it had been put on hold, and now here we are in 2022 with the game being fully released. Just from what is shown on the Game Jolt page, the game looks really cool, mixing that classic office style FNAF gameplay with the disturbing facilities and entities seen in the SCP universe. The game features very unique gameplay that is unlike any other fan game I have played before. Like, what other fan game is gonna have you playing tic-tac-toe to keep yourself alive? The game also has some really surreal, unexpected sequences that will really catch you off guard, as well as a very unique and visually appealing style, and some really cool pre-rendered cutscenes which tie the game's narrative together perfectly. Oh yeah, and it also features one of the most rage-inducing nights I have played in a FNAF fan game, where they straight up had me trying to code while also trying to not die from like 7 different enemies. But you'll have to wait towards the end of the video to hear me talk about that. Anyways, without further ado, let's jump into SCP The Endurance to see if the 7 years of development was really worth the wait. When starting our new game, we immediately get hit with one of the coolest intro cutscenes I have seen in a fan game. This cutscene depicts a commercial for something run by the SCP Foundation titled The Endurance. The Endurance is a brand new program which allows Class D personnel to work on a few faulty areas in the facility, in exchange for a chance to gather additional food, and possibly even make it out of solitary confinement. This whole cutscene is done in a really cool corporate style animation, which is accompanied by a narrator and some very fitting music. The whole thing just has a cool tone to it and is executed perfectly. It's not boring at all and doesn't waste any time getting you hooked straight away, which I really appreciated. Right after the cutscene ends, we load into our very first night of the game, and this one serves as more of a tutorial than an actual night, featuring a phone guy who guides us around our office for the very first time. He teaches us how to turn our power on and off, how to turn our computer on and put in the password, and also teaches us about the cameras. In this game, there are 3 floors to the facility. Yes, 3 floors. We learned that on cam 2D, when clicking on this generator, we are able to turn off our ventilation. This will save us power, but will need to be rebooted every once in a while to help us maintain oxygen. We also learned that there are 2 doors on floor E in the cameras. You can only close one of the doors at a time, and this will become important later. We are also introduced to the mask of SCP-035, which allows us to fool one of the enemies in a later night. One other thing to note, which our phone guy doesn't mention as it's pretty obvious, is that we have a singular door to our right with a button to close it, as well as an open vent to our left and a hallway right in front of us. After this brief introduction to the game's mechanics, the night soon ends and we move on to night 2, where the real game actually begins. And during night 2, we actually get introduced to a lot of different SCPs. The first SCP we are introduced to is this teddy bear right here, who goes by the name of SCP-1048. We can actually see a description of these SCPs on our computer screen by entering the entity library or visiting the extras menu. SCP-1048 is described in the entity library to be a small teddy bear who is capable of moving on its own and is able to communicate through a small range of gestures. The subject often shows affection to individuals, which is given by a hug to their leg, but this SCP is also seen sometimes dancing or jumping in place. And while this SCP seems rather harmless at first, in-game it can actually seriously screw over your run. So the way SCP-1048 works is to save power in the game, you are able to actually turn off your computer, similar to how you would turn off the ventilation. 1048 will appear in the hallways similar to how Foxy does in FNAF 2, and will slowly get closer and closer to the office. You will need to spam your flashlight on them to move them back to their original location, as failing to do so will result in the bear appearing in your office and sitting on your computer. If this happens and your computer is already shut off, you will no longer be able to turn it back on, which basically screws over your whole run. If the PC is on, however, you can refrain from turning it off for the rest of the night, and and still have a chance at survival. This is probably the easiest enemy to deal with, but can still screw you over in some certain scenarios. Other than this though, there are 4 more SCPs introduced in this night. SCP-173 begins on this camera right here and needs to be monitored similar to Foxy in FNAF 1. SCP-173 can only move when it is not being looked at, so you must make sure you check the cameras from time to time. Failing to do this will result in 173 moving up a singular camera, and if you allow 173 to make it far enough in the building, it will eventually make it down to the 2nd floor and crawl through your vent, appearing on the left side of your office. If this occurs, you're basically dead. You have to keep eye contact with 173 the entire time to make sure you don't get jump scared. But when also trying to juggle your other tasks, this is practically impossible. This is a really cool mechanic though in my opinion, as say it's like 5 AM and you are very close to beating the night, you can still watch over 173 in hopes to stop them for long enough in order to reach 6 AM, which adds a really cool aspect to the character, kind of like a final chance of survival even though you already messed up. 173's origin is unknown. It was found in 1993 and is constructed from concrete and rebar. It is an extremely hostile object and is said to attack you by snapping your neck or strangling you, which is exactly what it does in its jump scare. The third SCP introduced to us is SCP-106. Instead of appearing like the other SCPs, when 106 appears, you will hear a sound cue accompanied by a black orb floating in one of the corners of your office. This means that you need to put on your mask and wait a few seconds for it to go away. Failing to do this, however, will result in one of the most surreal things to ever happen in a FNAF fan game to occur. Here, I'll just let it play out right now. Yeah, so after getting jump scared, instead of actually dying, we are brought to a first-person parkour section. And the reason I say this is so surreal is something about the transition from 2D classic FNAF style gameplay to 3D parkour is just so jarring, but not in a bad way. This just had me so caught off guard the first time it happened, but had me really curious to see what there was to explore in this area. Thanks to the game being made in Unity, it is able to have a fully explorable first-person area, which gives this game a really cool layer of variety. In this parkour section, we are able to find a few different skeletons laying around, along with 3 different parts of a ripped up paper, which have a code on them. This will come in handy during the final night of the game though, and help us unlock the true ending. Also in this alternate dimension, we are actually given a chance of redemption. Instead of immediately failing the night, we actually come back to life if we are able to parkour without falling and find this portal. This brings us back to our office where we can pick up exactly where we left off. If we fail the parkour, however, we fall to our death and the night is over. Such an interesting and unexpected mechanic for a character. This definitely was one of the most standout moments in the game in my opinion. SCP-106 is described in the entity library to be an elderly humanoid who is not agile and will stay motionless days at a time, waiting for somebody to prey on. When attacking, SCP-106 attempts to incapacitate its victim by damaging their major organs, muscle groups, or tendons, where they will then drag them into its pocket dimension. SCP-066 tests our reflexes by making us react quickly whenever they try to get into our office. Every once in a while during the night, you will hear banging in the vents, meaning that 066 is getting closer to the office. After this, at any moment, a vent towards the top of the screen can come undone. We must flick our mouse as fast as we can and close this vent before 066 plops down onto our desk. This game does not give us a lot of time at all to react, so whenever you hear this SCP entering the vents, you will be on edge the entire time, just waiting for that vent to come open, which can severely impact your run if you let the stress get to you and focus only on the vent when you should be doing your other tasks. Similar to 173, 173, 066 won't kill you immediately and will actually just sit on your desk for quite a bit of time before eventually triggering a very loud noise. This loud noise increases the AI of all the other SCPs. For night 2 and 3, we don't really have to worry too much about this one, but it is still good practice to be closing those vents every time they open. I'll tell you right now, nothing is worse than losing a run to whatever this thing is right here. The description for SCP-066 describes it as a massive braids, yards, and ribbon. Strands of SCP-066 may be taken individually and manipulated. When this is done, a note on the diatonic scale C, D, E, F, G, A, B is produced by this object. Yeah, I'm not even gonna pretend like I know what that means. For the final SCP introduced in Night 2, we have SCP-860, who will be seen staring at us in the cold forest through our right doorway. Every once in a while, we will hear a breathing noise indicating to us that they are about to strike. From here, we must close our door quickly, as failing to do so will result in us getting jump scared. This one is not too hard to deal with on its own, but does cause problems involving power management in the later nights, as having the door closed for too long eats a lot of power. This SCP's description is actually very interesting, as it's actually just a blue key. When this key is used to unlock a door, the door leads to a small forest clearing instead of the door's usual destination. This explains why there is a snowy forest in the middle of an underground facility. The description also states that the trail inside of SCP-8601 will lead you to another door attached to an infinite concrete wall, and this door will actually lead you to your normal destination. This is just such an interesting idea for an SCP. And just a quick disclaimer guys, this is one of my first exposures to the SCP universe, so learning about these characters for the very first time is just really fascinating to me. So I hope you guys don't mind hearing these descriptions, as I'm not sure how many people have already heard of these characters. Anyways, that is all of the enemies that are attacking us during Night 2, and despite pushing 4 different SCPs on us during technically our first night, this one isn't too hard at all. They are pretty lenient on the amount of power you can use during this night, and the SCPs aren't very active. 173 moves very slowly and doesn't need to be checked on too often. 066 is pretty easy to get rid of for now, and most likely won't kill us even if they do appear in our office. And the other SCPs like 106 and 860 only attack like once or twice during the night. So giving us this night to get settled with all of the mechanics was a perfect decision on the developer's part in my opinion. Hey, by the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, please consider subscribing. It means the world to me. Night 3 is where the game really starts picking up speed. Starting from now on, we need to make sure we are conserving power as much as possible. This often involves turning off the ventilation and only turning it on temporarily to regain oxygen before once again turning it off. We can also save power by doing stuff like turning off our PC every time 106 comes in the room, as that time we spend in the mask we won't be able to be on the computer anyways. We also need to be checking in on 173 more frequently, as it is actually able to reach our office pretty fast in this night. On top of all of this, we are introduced to yet another SCP who adds another thing to worry about. This is SCP-079, who appears in the form of this screen that we can look at on the far left of the room. SCP-079 asks us to play a game of tic-tac-toe with him. So now throughout the night we must also try to win or draw games of tic-tac-toe in order to prevent them from killing us. Ignoring the game completely or not making a move quick enough will result in 079 shutting off all of our systems, which when unexpected can completely screw you over. But having a task that requires you to actually sit there for a few seconds, planning out your turn, can be a huge distraction when you are worried about other things like the ventilation and also checking in on 173. This night requires you to be on your toes the entire time and really test your ability to remember all of the mechanics needed to survive. The difficulty ramp up is perfect in my opinion though, as it wasn't too hard but did take me a few tries to get through. This night is perfectly challenging while also not being too punishing. 079 is described in the entity library as an Exidy sorcerer microcomputer that was built in 1978. In 1981, a now deceased college student attempted to code an AI that would continuously evolve and improve over time. The student then moved on after completing the project, leaving 079 in his cluttered garbage. You can also sometimes throughout the game randomly see 079's face glitch onto the cameras, kind of like the hallucinations in FNAF 2, which is just a really cool detail in my opinion. Seeing it try to interfere with your camera lines up perfectly with its description, so it's a very fitting scare to put in the game. Night 4 continues to ramp up in difficulty, this time forcing you to be even more conservative with your power, while also introducing the last two SCPs you will need to face off against. The first of these two SCPs is 049, or as most people know them, the Plague Doctor. 049 will appear in the bottom floor of the facility in the cameras and will roam around for a little bit before approaching one of the two doors. You'll need to monitor 049 throughout the night and close the appropriate door to prevent them from reaching the second floor, as failing to do so will result in your death. Although his jump scare is pretty funny, he kind of just leans in and stares at you. Only one of these doors can be closed at a time, but luckily they don't use up any power. I never really had any trouble with this one, but it still does add a lot of stress to the night. Sometimes it feels like you don't even have enough time to be checking other cameras other than SCP-173 and the ventilation, which can add a lot of tension to those moments when you are checking in on them. 049 is described in the entity library as a humanoid who bears a medieval Plague Doctor mask. The robe 049 is wearing is also said to be actually grown out of its body over time, which makes it indistinguishable from whatever form is underneath it. 049 is capable of speaking in various languages, but tends to use either English or medieval French. For the final SCP introduced to us in Night 4, we have SCP-096. 096 will act a lot like Golden Freddy, randomly appearing in your office or in a camera. If you see 096 crouched down in a camera, you must immediately flick the camera down in order to prevent your death. This makes you have to be more aware of what you're looking at on the cameras in order to spot if this entity is hidden in the shadows. If you see this SCP hunched over in your office, however, you must flick the camera up to get rid of it, which isn't a problem on its own, but when paired with other entities like 106 and 066, it can feel like you have barely enough time to execute all the movements necessary in order to survive, which I find to be a perfect addition as these SCP mechanics don't overlap with any of the others, and add yet another layer to the already fast-paced, reflex-based gameplay. This night was extremely sweaty and took me a long time to beat, but it is far from the hardest challenge this game has to offer. Night 5 introduces no new entities to the game, but serves as a final test before Night 6. Every AI is ramped up to almost the max, which makes this night a stress-inducing chaotic experience, where you will be trying to balance so many different things. You need to focus on conserving your power, watching over the doors on the third floor, reacting to the vent, flashing your light on the hallway, closing the door when necessary, flicking the camera down when you see 106, and playing tic-tac-toe in a constantly difficult 6-minute night. This took me many attempts to beat, but after feeling it, it felt like I had truly mastered the game's mechanics. One thing I really like about SCP the Endurance is it does not rely on RNG mechanics at all during the game. Every single death felt like a lesson learned, and now that I have completed the 5th and final night, I feel like I can do it again. It doesn't feel like a luck-based game, but a game about precision, planning, and execution, which definitely does take away from the horror aspect a little bit, but makes the gameplay overall an amazing and enjoyable experience. Now that is where the main game ends. However, if we want the true ending, we must do a few extra steps to get it. And this is by far the hardest part of the entire game, and even maybe the most challenging thing I've done in a fan game. So remember those papers we were able to collect in the pocket dimension? Well, we are able to take those 3 papers on the wall and piece them together in order to form a code. With this code, we can go in on night 6 and enter this into the computer, which will begin the path to the true ending. After this, typing run power manager on the computer will unlock a whole new screen on our second monitor. Now to get the true ending, we must type various code prompts on this screen in order to activate the elevators needed to escape. And this is no easy task. This straight up had me bashing my desk from how difficult it was. Everything needs to be executed perfectly or else you will die. Not only do we need to defend ourselves against every single SCP we had to deal with during night 5, but we now must do that while also balancing all of these coding sections. Thankfully, there was a guide on YouTube which helped me figure out this confusing mess of a true ending, but even then it was still so difficult. I'm not even sure how to fully explain this night, but I'm gonna do my best. So basically we need to first deactivate the elevators allowing SCP-173 and SCP-049 from being able to reach us, which will get rid of 2 threats we would have had to deal with. We then need to deactivate 3 cameras on this floor right here, and then activate 3 elevators before activating the 2 we shut off at first, which allows us to click on the hallway and leave. To turn an elevator on or off, we must use the information on the left side of the screen to type the proper code. These codes need to be entered perfectly and can be extremely hard to type while under the immense pressure the game puts you on. This section had me feeling like I deserved a computer science degree after completing it, the way I was putting in these codes. After many painful attempts though, I eventually had the full strategy mastered and executed the true ending, which gives us our final cutscene of the game.
I have stayed in this cursed place for far too long. I knew how to deal with these creatures. But all it takes is one slip. One mistake. And I'm gone. I've been risking my life for years. I'm not afraid to risk it. One last time.
Overall, I would say that SCP the Endurance was absolutely worth the wait. You can truly feel the level of detail and passion that was put into this game. Things like the entity library, void sections, and the secret endings add so much character to the already great experience. The gameplay, while not very scary to be honest, felt absolutely flawless to play. This is a fan game based on strategy and execution more than it is based on being scary, but that is honestly fine by me. If you like mastering these types of games, you will absolutely love SCP the Endurance. The visual style of the game is also really charming to me. All the SCPs have very unique designs, and the facility location doesn't look like anything I've seen out of another fan game. The game also has extras and a custom night to perfectly wrap up the game into a nice content complete package. If I had to score this game out of 10, I would honestly give it a 9 out of 10, as I truly think the gameplay is perfectly balanced. Even the 6th night, I think it should stay how it is. Even though it is extremely difficult, you feel absolutely amazing after completing it. I recommend anyone who seeks out to play these fan games for themselves to definitely check this one out. It's definitely not one that should be looked over. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing, it means a lot to me, and I will see you all with the next video. Peace.